here we go again. Today, we're back for another video on the channel. Today, we're going through something new. We're doing my quarterback rankings for the 2026 NFL Draft. Now, this QB class is weak. Let me start off with that. You got the big one, Dante Moore going back to school. You've got Maava, you've got Mateer, you've got Sellers, all guys who right around that first round range. Do I think they made the right decision going back? Definitely. I think Maava is one who could benefit from going in the draft, actually. And Dante Moore even, too. But let's get right into it. We're starting off with my tier 1, the best quarterback of the class. Not even close. And he's been my best quarterback the entire time. Now, Dante Moore, there were talks about him maybe being pick 1. He has higher upside. I could see the argument, but here we are. Obviously, he's not in the class. The Heisman winner, the All-American, the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year, and he just won the fucking Natty, right? I could go on with his awards and whatnot too, but he's in that tier of his own, basically. Now, with these quarterbacks, I'm going to go into kind of just the tiers they're in, of just these prospects as well, kind of just giving you a scouting report a little bit, as well as their NFL comp. Now, obviously, taking a look at Mendoza's incredible year at Indiana, who obviously played 16 games. They won them all. I think the closest game they had was Penn State, where he made an incredible couple throws to Charlie Becker, who's, I don't know why I said it so loudly, but who was super clutch all year long, and then he made a great throw over the middle to Omar Cooper, who made a great catch. He's a sniper. He's got elite processing, speed, and poise. He's a fast snap assessor who navigates a pocket like a veteran. He lacks the high-end magic when forced out of structure. I think he's very comparable to another Cal quarterback, Jared Goff. He's very pro-ready. He's 21, I believe. His timing, he's just super pro ready. I think he's basically that Jared Goff prospect. I don't think he's like Caleb or Burrow level. I know people have talked about, they should trade pick 1 down to the Jets, get a haul, and then wait till next year. No, that's not an idea. I think Mendoza probably doesn't have that MVP or top 3 upside, but I do think he could be around a top 5 to top 12 quarterback for most of his career. But a lot of that depends on who they bring in as their head coach. Clint Kubiak, obviously they lose out on Jesse Minter, who goes to Baltimore instead. So, on to tier 2. Now, moving on to tier 2, a guy who was one of the Heisman favorites with Mendoza for a lot of the season. Ty Simpson is my number 2 quarterback in the class. He's the best quarterback in tier 2. This is only 3 players in this tier. He had a weird year. He had a very good year for most of the time, and then the last 4 or 5 games, he started to drop off in production. If you take a look right here at his 2025 season, right here, this LSU game is the big one. I watched this game myself because I wanted to start seeing how Simpson was doing more and more. This game, he struggled. Oklahoma, obviously they lose that game. He throws 2 picks against a FCS school. I watched that one too. Now, Auburn, he played better. Georgia, obviously, we saw he played poorly. Played well against Oklahoma, and then Indiana, he played pretty poorly as well. But to be fair, pretty much every quarterback did this year, except like Colton Joseph maybe at Old Dominion. He's transferred to Wisconsin, I think now. But going back to Ty Simpson here, he's a very interesting prospect. He's a first-year starter with impressive mobility and pocket awareness. He can occasionally stare on targets or throw late, and that's kind of the problems we started to see later on in the season. He just has quick processing and anticipation, making him a potential high first round pick or middle to, we don't really know where he's going to go because we don't know what his market is. He had a chance to go back to school. Now, one thing with Alabama this year, I want to note, they were one of the teams with the most drops in all of college football. Not just the FBS, but the FCS too. Their receivers really struggled. Now, it was Bernard. Ryan Williams was a big one. I mean, I think he had 10 or 11. And Horton as well. I think someone comparable to him, just for his combination of arm strength and playmaking ability that we've seen. I know it's a bit of a stretch, but I do think Drake May is probably his ceiling. Yeah. And now moving on to my third player, Trinidad Chambliss. Now here with my third player in this list on Tier 2, my second player, Trinidad Chambliss. Now, what an interesting player, because he transferred in from the Division II school. He won the Heisman in D2. He goes to Ole Miss, backs up Austin Simmons. Austin Simmons goes down. Trinidad gets the starting job. And the rest is history. Obviously, he went on to a run into the college football semifinals. They lose to Miami. He didn't get an extra year of eligibility. He's suing the school and the NCAA. But he finished 8th in the Heisman, 22 TDs, 3,900 yards, 3 interceptions, and had 8 touchdowns on the ground. Now, he was pretty good. For a guy who nearly went to Wisconsin, I believe, or UCF, one of the two. One interesting rise in his stock. Now, I talked to some friends of mine as well earlier in the season where they were saying, what's this Chambliss guy? What's he about? Is he someone who's going to go high in the draft? At that time, he looked like a late-round pick. 5th, 6th round. Now, with his end of the season, just season as a whole, in obviously the SEC, which is arguably the best conference in college football, in my opinion it is, he dominated. He was one of the best players in the SEC, dominated in the playoffs. Obviously they beat Tulane, they beat Georgia, the big one, and then played pretty damn well against Miami. He's a dynamic player. He reinvented himself from a runner at Ferris State in D2 into a deep ball specialist. He's an elite adjusted completion rate on 20-plus yard passes. He just has an unorthodox sidearm mechanic, which leads to a lot of batted passes, but it's something we're starting to see a little bit more with quarterbacks lately. Obviously, as a Broncos fan, Bo Nix has a slight problem with doing that too, but I think the high for him as a NFL comp is probably closer to Russell Wilson, and I think his low would be around P.J. Walker, which I think is pretty fair, because P.J. Walker did have a very good arm, but and especially on the deep ball, if you can recall, I know I do, immediately I think of it, the DJ Moore deep ball against the Falcons, where they then miss the extra point. So, moving on to pick number 4. Now moving on to my last player of tier number 2. Garrett Nussmeier, who was one of the favorites to go number 1 at the beginning of the year. Him and Drew Aller. Cade Klubnik was even in those talks. I think we know how all that went. I know Sellers was really hyped up too. But a 5th-year guy, he decides to stay in school an extra year. After a 4,000-yard season, 29 TDs, 12 picks, he would have been top 10 pick, in my opinion. He stays. We know what happened. He was injured. He was pretty bad. If we want to take a look at the game logs here, in itself, I mean, the best game all year is against FBS school. Florida played mid. I mean, even Tech, he played poorly. Ole Miss, South Carolina. Vanderbilt was better. But it wasn't an impressive year for him. And then the last game he played where I did watch this game. I watched the Vanderbilt one as well, where he was okay. But the Bama game was bad. He has very poor pocket presence. If you watched him, I was super hopeful with him going back to school. Obviously, Ryan Kelly was supposed to do a pretty good job, and they had a fucking horrid year. Um, Nothing went to plan for LSU, and that's why Lane Kiffin is there right now. So, Nussmeier, natural upper body thrower. He consistently attacks downfield. His overconfidence and limited vision could just lead to a lot of volume of interceptions, as we've seen in his really only full year starting. Abdominal issue as a senior stopped a lot of his mobility, and that's when he fully got shut down after that Bama game where he was pressured nonstop. I mean, he was sacked constantly. So I think his high is probably around Kirk Cousins territory, and probably his low would be around Nick Mullins for his gunslinger play style. So, moving on to tier number 3 now with a guy who also could have gone first at the beginning of the year. Now, moving on to Drew Aller. Tier 3 for me. Now, man, I had such high hopes for him this year. I did. A lot of friends of mine, they give him a lot of stick. He had a poor end to last year. So it was rightfully so. Penn State themselves struggled in general, and Aller was at the center of it. Now, he did have an injury, obviously. Last year they made the college football playoffs. They lost to Notre Dame. They played pretty poor in that game. He was definitely one of the big reasons why as well. If we even just take a look at this year's games. Now, obviously, Penn State plays in the Big Ten, so, Villanova, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Kind of just a curious stat line. Then they lose to Oregon, where he threw a horrid pick in that game. And then the final straw was Northwestern, which is the game that did get James Franklin fired. UCLA game they even lost. He was pretty poor in that game in the first half. They were very bad with the play calling. They don't really ever know how to use him either. Now, he has a big arm. He has elite arm strength. Massive frame. But, yeah, he did have the season-ending ankle injury, which fucked up his final year. Now, I don't think he's a first-rounder. He's definitely, well, he shouldn't be. But I do think he's probably going to be a day 2 pick. I think he's just a tier below Nussmeier right now as a prospect. Just because I was more impressed with Nussmeier in 2024. Obviously, Aller had his struggles, but I was pretty hyped up for him this year. I thought he could have won the Heisman event too, but he has a raw processor, and he remains one who relies on out-of-structure highlights. So his real comp for me, his high, is Josh Allen, which was always the comparison for him at Penn State, and that's because of his arm. Now, did they ever use the arm properly? Not really. I mean, you could see it here. Obviously, they had Singleton and Kaytron Allen, who did impact his touchdown and, statistics, just in general. But Joe Flacco is his other comparison for his easy vertical arm talent. It's a hard player to grade as well, just like Nussmeier, who was kind of just injured all year long, or at least most of the year they were dealing with the injury. Even looking at Aller's 2024 season too, Boise State, obviously they beat. He had okay stats. I mean, 13 for 25 is interesting. They also beat SMU, where he had no TDs, only 127 yards. And they did lose to Notre Dame as well, where he was, again, not very good. Um, if you take a look even at 2024 statistics, it's just not super impressive. Kent State, West Virginia, you have 3 TD games. Purdue, but then Oregon 3-2, 2-3 against USC. Obviously they win, but I think Aller has more rushing upside than they gave him. Um, he did have 6 TDs and 300 yards in his full season of playing, but it just wasn't. He didn't do enough. Now, this is a prospect I have been very hyped on for the last 2 years. I thought he could have been the number 1 pick last year if he declared. Um, he's someone. I mean, as someone who likes Clemson just in general, I like the Deshaun Watson era. I like T-Law. Just always a team I've kind of rooted for, and Klubnik just in that same category. Now, as a sophomore, he had a weird year, 19-9. Clemson themselves didn't do as hot, but as a junior, they did make the college football playoffs. He had 36-6, which is why I thought, okay, he's staying at school. I think this is another guy who could win the Heisman. Obviously, you had Arch Manning in those talks. You had Nussmeier. You had Sellers. And who wins? Fernando Mendoza. So, this year was bad. He was injured a little bit as well, just like the other 2 before him, with Nussmeier and Aller. Even Sellers was hurt as well. Just a disappointing class of quarterbacks once again. After, obviously, 2024 looks like one of the greatest classes ever at quarterback with Drake May, Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels. I think JJ's still there. Penix, no, I don't think so. But this is a guy who was very hyped up this year. In 12 games, you have 16 TDs. That's it. Let's take a look at his game logs here as well. Obviously, they started the season off as a top 4 school. So did LSU. So did Penn State. All very hyped up. Now, Troy they beat, who they played very poorly against. But they lose 3 of the first 4. Now, they did fire the offensive coordinator. But losing a game to Syracuse where you go 37 for 60, I mean, he played poorly against GT. He played pretty well against UNC, who was not very good this year. Which was like, okay, maybe, he could turn it around a little bit. Then he plays BC, 1-1. Then he plays Duke, who they lose to by 1. Where he played better, definitely a lot better. No turnovers as well. But then it's like, you beat Florida State, you beat Louisville. Louisville had 0 TDs, pretty weird. Furman didn't play a lot, and then you have South Carolina, and then he fucking sucked in the bowl game. Now, the bowl game was against Penn State. No Drew Eller in that one. But still, he was expected to... I mean, it's his last college football game ever. You would think the guy wants to go out there and play, and boom. He played like shit. 22 for 39, 193. Nah, I mean, it's hard to look at the statistics because obviously sacks count against your rushing stats, but this is not good. 56, and he had, his second lowest rating of the year, only against LSU. Was it worse? He's an accurate passer with good ball placement. He can work through progressions. He just lacks power arm. Often leading or lofting passes rather than driving them, which limits his effectiveness in tight windows, and that will be even more apparent in the NFL. So my comparison for him would be Gardner Minshew. Kind of a weirder one for me, because he's just a weird prospect, kind of, right now. He was another guy, just with Aller, who was that tier below for me after just such a mid-season. He played more than Nussmeier and Aller did, and he was pretty fucking bad. 12 games, 16-6. Not going to cut it. Moving on to the 7th player on my list. Now, this is still in Tier 3, as I do think he, as well as the other ones, will go in probably day 2 at the latest. I still think he's going to be a day 2 pick. Obviously, he is a little older because he did play at Georgia for 5 years, and he played at Miami this year for 1. But he was good at Miami. Obviously, it's a very friendly conference for quarterbacks. Obviously, Kim Ward was there last year. Now they're going to bring in Darian Mensah, who I'm very excited to see, and I think Mensah is a lot better player than Beck is. Beck, you kind of just know what you're going to get. And I do think Miami wins that game probably with Mensah or just with a better quarterback. Now, this is a very well set up team. Just in general, obviously the coaching staff is brilliant. Cristobal, Jason Taylor on the defensive side at defensive line coach has done an amazing job with Mesidor and Ruben Bain. But I do think Beck is still an okay prospect. Obviously, again, like I said, it's a very weak quarterback class, so it's going to lead to guys going up in the rankings compared to other years. Now, he did have, did lead the conference in a couple different categories as well. Completion percentage, tied his career high at Georgia, and he finally played in the college football playoffs this year as well. Obviously, like I said, they did lose to Indiana, but he was better in the playoffs. Obviously, a lot of what Miami does goes through the run or the screenplay. Malachi Toney, who's, 2 years from now, we'll be talking about him and top 7-5 pick talks, which will be fucking crazy because we'll have Jeremiah Smith and then him back-to-back years, and then the year after that we'll have Chris Henry Jr. So he's a game manager. Carson Beck. He's got prototypical size. He thrives in disciplined structures like Miami was. Like I said, it's just felt very well set up for anyone to succeed, really. I think most quarterbacks who are decent in college football could probably go in there and probably make the playoffs. Obviously, they lost, 2 games to SMU, Louisville, but he did have some decent games. The Notre Dame one stands out. FSU, he played very well as well. Virginia Tech, Pitt even. He's just, again, like I said, if you watch these college football playoff games, you saw how bad he is in the pocket. Now, you see a lot of these games where he's negative in his rushing statistics. This is because he just has no pocket awareness. Like I'm saying, he has no running ability. A lot of these guys, and just most of the guys going to the league right now, have an ability to run. And I think that's something that really fucks his stock just as a whole, and it fucks him and fucks Miami, where they just don't have that ability to use him on the run. Oh yeah, he scored 1 TD, but got sacked 5 times, right? You just can't have that in the NFL. So I guess a comparison for him, quarterback-wise, in the NFL would be Davis Mills, who was a very similar player to Beck, who basically thrived in just a good situation. Now, I think he could succeed somewhere where they have it well set up for just a quarterback, maybe Minnesota. Another guy who benefited from a system. Now, Mac Jones is basically another comparison to Carson Beck, in my opinion. Like Mac Jones, I do think he's going to get moved, but I just don't think he's going to... It's a weird player. Mac Jones, I think, is a bit better than Davis Mills, but that's probably Carson Beck's peak, what Mac Jones is / will be. obviously, this game against Louisville, where they were ranked what, top 5, top 6 in the nation. Threw 4 picks. That's another one that stands out to me. But I think that's a fair comparison for him as we move on. On to a very fun prospect for me. I really like Sawyer Robertson's game, and I really liked him at Baylor. Baylor's a fun team, honestly, and I think DJ Lagway, who's transferring there this year, is going to benefit a lot from just him, just his system. They have a conference that doesn't play a lot of defense, obviously. You could see Robertson did lead in a lot of statistics. Obviously, they didn't win a lot, but 12 picks. But last year, even, he was still pretty good. But he's just he's a middle round prospect. I still think he might go day 2 late, and I think he'll be the last one or ahead of Beck because of the age. But he's a 4-year quarterback, technically. He didn't redshirt, even though he barely played at Mississippi State. He's an intriguing live arm, natural pocket feel. He trusts his pre-snap reads, scatter shot accuracy on down bases makes him a just developmental prospect or project even. So, if we take just a look at Baylor's game logs this year, or Robertson's, I mean, you see a lot of these games where he's throwing the ball a fuck ton, right? But they're not having a lot of success. It's kind of hard to look at this game positively. Obviously, 419-3. Oh, nice. But the completion percentage is down. And it's just, you lose by 14. You beat SMU. Samford, a non-conference team in the FBS. They lose, or they win, but 2 TDs. He's just very all over the place. Another one. Texas Christian. TCU. He plays pretty poorly, right? If we, go right back here again with Sawyer Robertson, it's just a game where he plays so poorly, it puts his team out of a position to win. Now, he still has 318, 2 TDs, but you can't always look at those. Now, I think player comparison to him is probably just Sam Howell, just because how he can really make stuff happen. Now, we've seen the best of him in these games. SMU, that's probably his best game, arguably ever. UCF, he played very well. Oklahoma State, I know Oklahoma State not great, but 5 TDs, 393. You win by 18. I think Sam Howell is very comparable. It's a weird prospect because he probably could go in for, the starter wherever it is and win a couple games, but I'm not sure he's a long-term guy. But I'm still going to leave him in Tier 3 because I do think he could be good somewhere. Now moving on to Tier number 4, Cole Payton. Now, very interesting prospect, and I just don't think he's done enough to go into that next, into that Tier number 3. He's a fast, tough, and physically powerful quarterback with, just a strong, high-end arm talent. But he is a pass-first quarterback who's difficult to bring down, as you can see by his size at 6'3", 233. He has limited game experience as an arm-dominant throwing motion. As you can see, he really only started 1 year, and that was this year. His comparison would be similar to Josh Allen, basically based off this usage. Now, look, even as a guy who only threw 27 completions, 2023, 615 yards, 13 TDs. Very interesting. could he be someone like Milroe who goes, third round based on his deep ball, as you see right here, 78-yard pass. I do think his stock could definitely go up. 13 TDs again, 777 yards on the ground, and then he had 27, 19, and 16 and 4. Like I said, Josh Allen, it's more of a Josh Allen light compared to Drew Aller. I think just it's hard to grade a guy in the FCS. Now, did he play, very good competition or competition that makes me say, oh damn, right? Because that's just kind of what you want to see. Now, he did beat Illinois State, who went on to lose the FCS championship. But, this stretch of games, not the greatest. Oh, he beat St. Thomas. It's a very hard prospect to grade because he is the best FCS prospect since Carson Wentz in 2016, who went number 2. Just like I mentioned, Mendoza and Goff. Now we've got Cole Payton, and I'm talking about the guy who went number 2 in that class, Carson Wentz. Now, like I said, I think his stock could totally go up because of his rushing ability. Milroe was projected to be a day 3 guy, perhaps, at the start, and I do believe he went in the 3rd round to Seattle. They didn't use him a lot, but I do think he has upside in his arm talent and on the ground. Just a super dual threat guy, and that's kind of just what the league is becoming. So, now first things first, I really don't like this guy. I'm not a fan of watching him at all this year, but he is a gritty player, and he is fearless, as a competitor who elevates his team despite having the size or arm strength. He's very good in the RPO game, quick game concepts, but he has a cap ceiling as a full field processor. But he did obviously come second in the Heisman. He just has a lot of antics. Now, we've had a couple of different players who have had lots of antics in the NFL. As I spit towards the camera, Baker Mayfield, Johnny Manziel. Some of them work, some of them don't. Obviously, he was very good at New Mexico State to win the CUSA Offensive Player of the Year, SEC Offensive Player of the Year this year. Finished second in the Heisman. Now, he did have some very impressive games this year, but he does tend to pad his stats quite a bit. Tennessee, dude had 165 yards, 1 TD. He was okay in the bowl game against Iowa. That's a very hard defense to play, but he did have 3 TDs as well. This is another one, where they beat Kentucky, but he started the season off okay, but then he did get very hot. But he did cause his team to lose these games against Bama, against Texas. Now, you could take a look. Again, it's similar to where I mentioned with Sawyer Robertson. 3 TDs, 1 on the ground, 365 yards. They were getting killed, and then they had a 4th quarter comeback, and they still lose. So, I don't want to, focus super heavy on some statistic like that. Utah State, he has 6 TDs and another 400 total yards, right? I care more about the SEC play or just against good competition. Now, like Charlton Southern, I don't care either. Auburn, impressive game. Kentucky, definitely. Tennessee, he was very good. He wins them that game, definitely, and that kicks Tennessee to the curb and out of playoff contention. I do think his probable comp is probably like Tyrod Taylor. I do think he could be a backup in the league. He's a little older. I don't think he's going to go ahead. I just don't think he's going to go day 2 or day 1, obviously. I just his age really limits him as an earlier round pick, and obviously not starting till you're 21 or 22 at New Mexico State. It's not the best looking, um, but he was pretty good at Vanderbilt the last 2 years, and obviously Vanderbilt had a lot of success because of him. He reinvigorated that program just in general, and even now they're bringing in a fucking 5-star quarterback who committed to Georgia. So yeah, I mean, again, I don't love this. I don't like this guy, but he might be good. On to my next player here, and I'm gonna go with Taylen Green, another guy in this tier 4 of quarterbacks. Just a weird prospect. Now he has a lot of upside on the ground, just like the guy before. He is probably the most physically gifted athlete in the class. He's 6'6", with a 6'6", 215. That is a build and a half. That is Tua, bro. Okay, it looks like Tua, but he's super speedy, as you can see with his statistics. 4.4 40 time speed is insane. Cannon arm, but he has fucking turnover issues like nobody's business. It's not 20 picks to 34 touchdowns at 2 years at Arkansas is not very good. He just has inconsistent passing mechanics, which is gonna get him as a day 3 guy. I do think his size and speed is gonna make him get picked and probably has a chance to go day 2, but his college resume is just not very impressive for me, and I think he could be a player comparable to like Taysom Hill or Josh Dobbs, who have made careers in the NFL. Obviously, Taysom Hill's had a lot of success. Josh Dobbs, just kind of just a guy in the NFL, but he did at one time go decently high, I think. And I know with Josh Dobbs, obviously you hear that name, you're like, I mean, he wasn't ever really good. Obviously, he had that nice run with Minnesota at one point, but was a 4th round pick one time, and there was hopes for him being somebody, right? You're just trying to take a chance on a late round quarterback. You never know when it might hit. Tom Brady was a 6th round pick, obviously, and then you have Tony Romo, who even went undrafted. So it's not all said and done at the end of the day. He could work out, and he has the natural ability to do so. Moving on to an interesting prospect for me, Luke Altmyer from Illinois. Now, I like Illinois. They're a fun team. He was pretty decent the last 2 years, and obviously Illinois was a team who had a lot of success because of him. Another 5-year guy, just a veteran who saw a lot of statistical jumps. Just, in his time at Illinois as the full-time starter, he can run the ball decently as well. He's a steady, efficient operator, but he just doesn't have an elite trait in him to push him into the top tier. I think he's probably just a product of their system. I do think he could be a decent backup and maybe start one time in the NFL. I think he's comparable to a guy like Case Keenum, who was obviously the college football passing yards leader ever. So, doesn't mean you can't be good just because you're a late round pick, like I keep saying. Now, this guy is weird. Now, I've seen some boards where he's ranked 3rd for whatever reason. I was making my own rankings of guys, and PFF had him at 3 for whatever hell reason. Now, I have seen him play, and this is where I have my start at tier 5. I think he's a reliable backup archetype who makes smart reads and doesn't overextend, but he's a big game hunter with low turnover risk. Just his high pressure to sack rate is a notable concern. I think probably he is comparable to Nick Mullins as well. Just a guy who can kind of just go in there, throw the ball a bunch. Obviously, Mullins doesn't have much rush upside. Neither did Kalimakis this year. Minus 26 rushing yards and 96 attempts. Technically, not great. But he is a decent passer, and he will probably be a 5th rounder in the NFL draft. Now moving on to a 6-year guy, another one, who played all 6 years at the same school, weirdly enough, at Kansas. Now, he didn't play some of these years due to injury, 2023 mainly. Last year, 14-12. He goes back one more time. Now, Kansas didn't have a lot of success this year. He definitely has the archetype to be decent, but he's just never put it together. And in these high leverage games, he's never been able to do anything really. But he isn't high Q veteran who improved the Kansas offense whenever he was healthy. Excellent dual threat statistics. Over 9K pass yards. He has 23 rushing touchdowns in 49 games. Pretty nice, too. But he does have a long history of injuries, and a primary hurdle would be that. These 2 years he was injured. Year before he was injured as well. But 2023 was the one where he was supposed to be very promising. He was one of the last guys who's going to benefit from the COVID year too. So, or TJ Finley next year too. That guy's really good. Okay, but I think someone comparable to him just because of how he plays. It's like Kyler Murray light because of his rushing upside and his ability to just throw the ball. Obviously, he didn't play every year, but he was decent these 2. And Kansas was a lot better because of it. Last year especially, they did choke so many games, or they lost by just a little bit multiple times. But that is my final prospect on this list. PFF had some other guys in their rankings. They had 2 guys from Division 2 who I would expect to be 7th rounders. They were just tier 6 guys for me. Jack Strand, shout out to him, and Kyle Walljasper from MSU Moorhead and Minnesota Duluth. I don't think they're going to be guys who are going to be picked. They're probably just going to be undrafted free agents who run around on the practice squad just for a little bit. But, like I said, just because you go undrafted doesn't mean you can't succeed in the NFL. But that is all for me on this video, ranking my top 14 quarterbacks who I think will get drafted. And let me know how I did. Or, we'll see how I did, in 3 months. But I think right now this is what I think. But some of these guys definitely interchangeable. I think Sawyer Robertson, definitely a guy who could move up. Jalen Daniels could definitely move up as well. And yeah, I will see y'all on the next one. Peace.